An unusual combination, a rich beet chocolate cake. And that's what I'm getting ready now, the beets to go into the cake. You need to have cooked beets. I need 3/4 cup. I do find it easy to just use a paper towel to hold onto the peeled beet as I'm grating it. But if you do find you have a little beet juice on your fingers, rub them on a freshly cut lemon, and that acidity pulls away the color. I'll measure out my 3/4 cup, not tightly packed, just loosely spooned into the measuring cup. And I'll set those aside while I get the rest of the cake batter going. To start with the batter, I'll measure 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And for an intensity of chocolate flavor and color, I measure in 2/3 cup of cocoa powder. Chocolate cakes made using cocoa powder instead of melted chocolate are inherently tender because cocoa powder has no protein or gluten to it, so it actually contributes to a tenderness in a cake. And now for the sugar. I need 1 3/4 cup. Cocoa powder has no sweetness to it, and I have to balance it with the addition of sugar. There we go, 1 3/4 cups. And a teaspoon of baking powder, and the same measure, a teaspoon of salt. Sift this all in. To the dry mixture, I'm going to add 3/4 cup of unsalted butter. Because I've got cocoa powder in here, I'll start on low speed and then slowly increase it. There we go. There still are a few visible pieces of butter, and that's okay. Now I'll add 2 eggs and pour in a teaspoon of vanilla. And I'll give this a blend on low speed. While the mixture still has this dry texture to it, I can add my beets, and beets are just so good for you. So that deep, rich red color in the beets really complements the chocolate. And once I add 1 1/4 cup of hot water, you'll really see that purple tinge come out. What I need to do now is beat the cake first on low speed, then on high speed for about 2 minutes to build in some structure. As you can see, this is quite a fluid batter. I've got my cake pans ready, 2 8-inch cake pans. I've greased the entire pan, put parchment in the bottom, but additionally, I coated the sides with flour. That way, the cake has something to climb onto as it rises, but without sinking from a greased pan. Different batters require different treatment. So I'll just pour the batter in, and these are ready for the oven. I've preheated it to 350, and it takes about 35 minutes. Oh, you can really smell the chocolate. And the test, the skewer comes out clean, so I know my cakes are done. And I'll just set them aside to cool for half an hour in their tins. Then I'll turn them out to cool completely. While they're cooling, I can work on the fudgy frosting. I have 1/2 cup of butter plus 2 tablespoons, and I'm gonna melt that first. While that's melting, I'll measure out 1 cup of sugar. I'll add the sugar, give it a little whisk. The mixture's just starting to bubble, so now I can add 3/4 cup of sifted cocoa powder. And I'll carefully whisk this in. And now again, I'll wait until I see some bubbles. There we go, already rising to the surface. And now I add 3/4 cup of whipping cream. Again, I have to bring it up to a full simmer and then let that cook for at least a minute. And you'll see it actually thickens up a little bit. There we go. I can see that it's thickened enough because you actually see the bubbles slow down as they rise to the surface. I'll take this off the heat and pour it into a bowl. Now I'll add just a pinch of salt to temper the sweetness of the fudgy frosting and a teaspoon of vanilla. So I'll stir this in now. It's too hot to use as a frosting. I'll set this aside to cool to room temperature. And then the key is to put it in the fridge, but don't forget about it. You want to stir it every so often and keep an eye on it until you achieve that beautiful frosting consistency. I'll set this aside, and I have one, and you can see it's set, but still spreadable. So now I can assemble the cake. And I have the chocolate beet cake that I've let cool down out of its pan completely. This time I have an 8-inch cake board. I'm gonna put a nice generous dollop of this frosting on. Spread the frosting to the edges from the center. The other cake layer right on top, and then put a big dollop of this frosting on top. I push it right to the edges, then I put the frosting on the sides to meet the top edge. So you can leave the cake simply decorated, or use your spatula as a decorator's tool. Now, to have the sides match the top, I'll bring my spatula inward, and this will clean up this top edge at the same time. Make a nice little curl on top. Because this is a more elegant dessert, I'll put it on a platter. The cake board comes in handy once again, and I store the cake refrigerated. Here is the grand finale. Let's dive in. Time to eat a serving of beets, I think. Oh, and you can feel that it is a dense, rich chocolate cake. And we've got the beets in there. And now that you've mastered 3 styles of veggie cakes, each with a different vegetable, how about getting inventive and integrating mashed potato into mini chocolate cupcakes?